Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Live. My name's Derek Arden, and I'm delighted to have a friend of ours on Monday Night Live, Tim Durkin, known as Texas Tim Durkin, from Glenbury, near Dallas in Texas. Tim, welcome back. It's great to see you there, dressed up smartly like me. What can we say, you know, us Americans and Brits making a lot of money. So your book, I've got 2 copies of it here, absolutely fantastic. A blue one and a red one. I don't know which was the first one, but moving from promise to performance. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you about 1 or 2 things in the book that took me not by surprise, but they resonated with me. The first one is, what's your cattle guards? What does that mean?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back, Derek. It's always a pleasure to be on your chat show, and I'm very excited to be here. I feel very, very much like I am among friends. Cattle guards was something that I discovered shortly after I moved to Texas a long time ago, probably 50 years ago. And as I visited my friends that had ranches or I went hunting, it was my job, because I wasn't driving, to jump out and open the gates that are closed to keep the cattle in. And then the truck would go through, and then I'd jump back out and close the gate. Now, if you're driving and you're trying to get to the back pasture, you may do this 6 or 7 times. And it's 100 degrees or 40 plus degrees centigrade out there, and you know, you're pretty worn out by the time you get out to where the cattle are that you have to feed or count or take care of. Well, some enterprising farmers came up with an idea that they dug a trench and they put 6-inch diameter pipes in a row, maybe 10, maybe a dozen of them. And they didn't need a gate then, because a cow knows instinctively that it cannot walk across a series of pipes because of the hooves. They would slip and fall, and they would be thus on their way to hamburger heaven earlier than anticipated. But while that kept the cows in, it tore up the trucks, and because the ranch hands would go hit those things, and it's very, very bumpy. So some enterprising person came up with the idea that if they brought up the pipe, they covered up the hole, covered it with asphalt or tar or concrete, and then if they just painted 10 or 12 white stripes 6 inches in diameter, the cows wouldn't know the difference. And they don't. It doesn't tear up the trucks, and the cows don't cross it. But it's just paint. And the whole idea is, we sometimes erect painted cattle guards in our lives where we choose not to do something because we don't think we're going to be able to do that. The limitations we place on ourselves before we even try to break out into something new can be devastating. So that's the idea behind painted cattle guards. And I'll remember one time being in Utah when we were turning onto a highway, the entrance ramp onto to what you would call the M motorway. All of a sudden, I noticed, my friend driving, I noticed that there was painted cattle guards on the entrance to the freeway. And I said, holy cow, I can't believe that you have painted cattle guards on the highways out here in Utah. He said, what are you talking about? I said, those lines of paint, don't you notice them? He said, yeah. I said, you know what they're for? He said, yeah, there's some kind of paint test or something. I said, no, they're cattle guard. They keep the cows off the highway. And he said, Tim, I've lived here for 25 years and I have never once seen a cow on the highway.
Wow.
And as soon as he said those words, he and I both started laughing. Obviously, they worked. So anyway, that's the idea behind cattle guards, is putting limitations on you or someone else, because it's never get out a bucket of paint and start painting cattle guards around your friends or your relatives, loved ones when they want to do something, because there are people walking around with buckets of paint that'll profess your limitations.
That is a great metaphor, Tim. I love it. And in fact, everybody on here is here because we are really positive people, and we don't let people put limiting beliefs on us. But sometimes when our guard's down, or when the cattle guard's down, we do pick up their toxic their toxic comments, which are really
Yeah.
unhelpful because they work on the unconscious mind as
Well, Derek, if I may recall back when I talked about my friend Jim, who the teacher called Jim, who said, "Jim, you're too stupid to get long division." Okay. And it turns out he was a mathematical genius, but nonetheless, that was the biggest turn in his life. Yeah, that was a pain in cattle guard.
Absolute disgrace that people do things like that, and they need to understand more about positive thinking and the language we use. And we're going to do some more of that in a few weeks' time. Next question: who's the keeper of the flame?
The keeper of the flame is a hero. Back in the day, there would be large caravans of people, especially in Europe, large caravans of people moving. Sometimes whole villages would move from one spot to the next, but large bands of people would move and they'd walk during the day, or if they were really important, they would ride in coaches. The word coach means to carry forward, and it was generally only important people who were coached. Interesting metaphor there. But the rest of us were pedestrians, afoot, pedis, Latin for foot. But anyway, they would travel, and at the end of the day, they would be tired, hungry, and cold. But there was always some or one person in the group whose whole job it was to carry burning embers and to keep those burning embers burning, so that as soon as they stopped to encamp, that person would start to build the fire for warmth, the fire for food, the fire for protection, if there were wild animals about. Well, the keeper of the flame turned out to be a very important job. And I believe that we need to carry the fire. Everybody on this call, I know almost everybody to some extent or the other, we keep coming back because we're, I believe, keepers of the flame. But there are also dousers, D-O-U-S-E-R-S. There are people who will blow out your flame, or there are people that would knock the embers out of your hand just for the sake of doing it. And so I believe that the keeper of the flame is an important job now. We have to carry the fire as it was then. And so I always look for keepers of the flame. And I always try to be one, the keeper of the flame of positivity. You know, the other part I mentioned in the book is the candle is such a great metaphor, because if you're holding a candle, you can light somebody else's candle. Your candle is not in any way diminished, but the light is doubled. And we can continue that. And so I think the candle and the keeper of the flame, very strong metaphors.
It is. And people that read my newsletter this morning will have seen I used one of your other metaphors from the book, actually, in the title. You can count the number of pips in a tomato, but seeds in a tomato, but you can't count the number of tomatoes in a seed. Where did you get that one from? I loved it.
Well, I wish I could tell you accurately who that is. That is not mine. I heard it, I think, on a tape, and I suspect it might have been Jim Rohn or maybe Brian Tracy. I literally cannot tell you, but I know if you Googled it, you'd probably find half a dozen people that claim it. It was probably Abraham Lincoln said it on the internet. But that's a really strong idea, because if you're a speaker, you know that you've had people come up to you after a session and say, that really was great. That changed my life. That did this or that did that. It's like Robert Fripp, Patricia's brother, phenomenal guy when he talks about acts of quality, ungovernable by measure. You just do something nice. I'll give you an example because I follow Robert's advice. The other day I was at my market and I wanted to test a brand of turkey that I hadn't had before, a taste of turkey. I wanted to know if I'd like it. So I went up to the young lady that was working there and I said, would you mind if I could get a taste of this? Now, it was instantly apparent to me that this young girl wasn't enjoying her job, wasn't enjoying where she was, wasn't very happy. But it was a job. And maybe she had other things going on in her life. I didn't know that. But she said, she said nothing. And she went and she said, which one? And I said, I'd like to try the Cajun spiced turkey to see if I like it. And so she unwrapped it, cut me a slice. I tasted it. I liked it. And I said, I'll take some of that. She cut it up, she put it away, and she handed it to me. And I looked at her and I said, can I tell you something? And she said, yeah. And I said, whoever designed those glasses that you're wearing had you in mind. They absolutely look awesome. And she said, oh my gosh, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, they're new. And I said, well, they look great. And I walked away. I hadn't gotten 20 meters away when I felt somebody tug at my arm. I turned around and it was her. And she said, sir, you have no idea what you just did for me. With all the things going on in my life, that was the best thing that happened to me. And the tears were streaming down. Now, I'm not talking about Tim Durkin here. I'm talking about a simple act of quality. Because that's a tomato seed, right? No telling what the rest of the day was. No telling how she's going to pay that compliment forward. You just can't count the number of tomatoes in one seed that you planted. And I'm a planter. That's it.
That's a great story, Tim. Yeah, there's a lot to be taken away from that.
Well, that's Robert Fritz act of quality or act of moral beauty.
Random acts of kindness. That's I must have taken that back from an American speaking conference as well. That's what I wrote down while you were saying that. Third question from your book. What's the worst word in the world?
Well, the worst word in the world was taught to me by a very successful football coach, national champion, American football, collegiate champion, Lou Holtz. I happened to be sitting at a table with him and two other successful coaches in Olympic sports, swimming and tennis. And, you know, I couldn't offer anything to the conversation, except occasionally I'd stand up and say, hey, anybody want a beer? Yeah, I'll take one. Okay. But that was my role. I mean, I couldn't add anything to conversation. I'd never been at that level player wise or coaching wise. But Lou said something. He said, you know, I think the key to getting the best performance out of your people is you never get shitty with them. And everybody said, what'd you say, Lou? He said, don't ever get shitty with them. And I thought he said another word, and you might think I said another word, but he said, you never tell a kid what they should have done, because as destructive as can be. He said, here's why. Number one, it's a testament, it's a statement of failure. You should have and didn't, ergo you failed. It's also in the past tense, which means number three, they can't do anything about it. And so it said, well, Lou, what should you say? He said, next time. He said, we always say next time, never what I should have done, never what you should have done. He said, you don't say should have with kids, because first of all, you got a player that's eager to play, and then all they hear from you is they should have done this, you should have done that. Guess what? They don't want to play football, soccer anymore. They don't want to play volleyball or basketball, because why? The ride home is all about what you should have done. You should have passed it over to little Mary. She's standing in front of an open goal doing deep nasal probes, and you're hogging the football. It doesn't happen. He said, but the worst person that you should never get shitty with is yourself. He said, the self-talk that we give ourselves, we would slap somebody into next week if they dare say it to us. But ourselves, oh yeah, I should have done this, I should have done that, I never should have done this. And, you know, I can go into a whole thing, but it's a very dangerous word. Interestingly enough, and correct me if I'm wrong or examine this, I never hear elite performers say they should have done that. Your man Pep, I bet he never says we should have done this. He'll say, next time we'll do this. Why does next time work? Future focused, controllable, non-judgmental. The opposite of what we should have done. So I always, I have an ear now for should have. And I have seen some players say, well, I should have done this, I should have done that. And I sit up straight And the next thing you know, they're out of the league. They're out of a job. One person in particular, famous football coach Jimmy Johnson, he never said that. It was always next time, next time, next time. And then one time there was a ignominious defeat that the Cowboys suffered. And he said, we should have done this, we should have done that. And I sat up straight and I said, I can't believe Jimmy Johnson said that. The next week he retired from coaching. Yeah, it's a disastrous word.
Fantastic. Now, in your book, you talk about running up the flagpole, which is quite interesting for me, because as you know, I worked in banking for over 30 years. And this weekend, Silicon Valley Bank went belly up, and it's been taken over in the UK. The UK arm's been taken over by HSBC. I wonder what government guarantees they gave HSBC. I'd have been in there negotiating on their behalf. I'm very interested in that. But we used to say in the bank, when we didn't want to agree something, we'll just run it up the flagpole in meaning going to HQ or whatever. Didn't matter whether we're running up the flagpole or not, and see what comes out. Your meaning of that was slightly different in your book.
Yes, well, and Carl can correct me with the wrong or expand. He's very welcome to do it. But when we say let's run it up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes, we mean let's try it. Let's just propose this, okay? And say, well, what if we did give people all their money back, or what if we did give we did offer to do this? It's a test. Carl, do you agree?
That's exactly what it is. Yes.
Yep. So it's a little bit different than your meaning, Derek.
Yeah, it's interesting how these different metaphors or sayings cross the Atlantic and get tied up in different countries. I'm fascinated by the whole thing. Another phrase of yours in the book I liked, Tim, was the skin is just the envelope. It's the message inside that counts.
Yeah, I feel real strongly about this. As you know from my story, in my family, it was, you can't judge a book by its cover. That is not my quote. I don't know whose quote that is, but it's our skin is the envelope. The message is what's inside. And I'll just leave it at that. I mean, when we are obsessed with skin and ethnicity, and it's a useless. We shouldn't be. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. My tongue just flipped over my eye tooth and I couldn't see what I was saying. Yeah, it's just a case of don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, because there's often gold inside. Gold, and if we haven't seen that by now, I don't know what it's going to take. I'm worried if it's going to take more than that.
Next time I interview Damian Lewis, and he has agreed to come on the show in May, I think it was May anyway, we can ask him about his book covers, because the inside Damian's books, they're fantastic, but they have different covers for America and different covers for the UK, which and different titles, which amaze me. So people do judge books by their cover, don't they? Because that's what sells them, I guess. But
well, yes, if you remember that great author you had a couple of weeks ago, her book is the same in the US, and it doesn't resonate with a lot. It won't resonate with a lot of people, despite the fact it's a really good book.
Joanna Gwowden. Well, I couldn't say her name at the time, and I can't say it now. Now, let's get on to Ask a Yank. I didn't put that in my newsletter. I wasn't sure everyone would understand Ask a Yank, but I invited people to send in any questions, however difficult they were. But the first question I've got for you is, what happened to Silicon Valley Bank, and why wasn't it being monitored properly? Do you know much about that?
Oh, no. The direct answer is because right now there's a lot of blaming going on. They're blaming Trump because he lightened the regulations. Well, the regulations were choking banking, apparently. So it's a lot of finger pointing. It's a lot of this because it makes the government look real bad, because they did allow that situation to occur, whether whoever's fault it is. But there's a lot of money at stake, and there's people with millions of dollars, and they're only guaranteed to 250,000. But I think yesterday, in order to stop a run on the banking system, they came out with this promise to make everybody whole. That's going to be very expensive.
Yeah,
And it will put a chill on the development of Silicon Valley, because that was an entrepreneur's dream. I'd love to know the pitch freak Antonio White's view on that, because he's very connected to funding of startups in Silicon Valley.
we'll have to get him back on. And so the second question is, Tim, why do you Yanks tip so highly?
Where in England or in?
Well,
in
no, I mean, you 10% is the norm here, maybe
Yeah.
12.5% if you're being really generous. Giving cash to the server is a good idea, because often they don't get it if it's put on the bill. But you guys seem to give 20% or 25%. Why is that?
Yes, it's becoming a big thing now. The word tips is to ensure prompt service. Okay, it's an acronym, actually, to ensure prompt service. So when you got prompt service and you didn't have, or when you received prompt service and you didn't have to wait long, then they would customarily give 10 and then 15%. Then all of a sudden in New York, San Francisco, in the major cities, it went up to 20%. And it's pretty much universally around the US, 20% now, despite the service. If you get bad service or slow service in a restaurant, it's almost never the server's fault. It's a problem in the kitchen, low staff, or you know, we have a lot of problems staffing restaurants now because people don't want to work in restaurants. The other reason is that all of us know somebody or ourselves that worked in the restaurant industry. And we know we got $2 an hour and we're expected to survive on tips, which is criminal, right? I mean, but that's been the way until last year or two, where they're now giving 15%, 15% minimum wage, $15 per hour minimum wage. So yeah, it used to be to compensate the servers, like that was our job, not the restaurant's job. But that's how it came to be. And I have gotten pushback. I remember I got pushback in Ireland in 1994 when I did tip 20%. And there were two bartenders at Temple Bar, and one of the bartenders barked at me. The other one that I gave it to didn't say anything, but the other one said, "Why are you Americans such heavy tippers? You're just showing off." I thought it was normal.
It's very rude of him to say that, but
well, he might have been mad that he didn't get it.
Yeah. Okay, third question is, why have you got these fire pits? You're stoking global warming with everything you do.
Yeah, well, we actually didn't know that. There hasn't been any movement against fire pits. And keep in mind, living in Texas, where if you sit outside, it's usually 40, you know, even into the evening. So the fire pit doesn't typically get a big workout. Now, on the shoulder season, the spring and the fall, that might happen. But once again, there is this resistance in the US that when the government mandates something, especially in Texas, it's almost mythical in Texas. But whenever the government mandates something, the federal government mandates something, you can be sure that there will be pushback. So yeah, it's we didn't know the impact. What is under assault now? Do you all have leaf blowers that when the lawn care people? Well, the gasoline.
What do you mean the lawn care people? You're talking to my lawn care people at the moment.
Yeah, well, as am I. But the thing that they're really pushing now, and Carl can speak to this, especially in California, are the gasoline-powered lawnmower. Not only the noise, but the pollution is more than dozens of automobiles and motor vehicles for just a half-hour use. So that's having a big impact on the environment.
Yeah, so
But the fire pit is all about the camaraderie. I mean, it's a great place to talk and have a pint or two or four.
well, we all like that. So we may as well talk about Texas and guns before we close this part of the session. You're really a country on your own in Texas, aren't you? You don't obey any rules of America and Washington, do you?
Yeah, it has a mentality since the beginning of being different, and it was in fact a different country, but it's the only state that came in by treaty rather than came in by acquisition, if you will. And part of the terms of the treaty is that the capital is higher than the US Capitol, stands taller, and the Texas flag is the only state flag that can fly at the same height as the American flag. Now, I happen to fly the Texas flag underneath the American flag, but I don't have to. It just required 2 flagpoles, and I don't want to do that. But it's mythical. They go counter to the US, and it's something you pick up on right away. Now, there's a lot of migration from California. As a matter of fact, more than half the homes on my street, and another one is going to be moved into shortly, are native Californians that have moved here. And in Austin, more Californians. It's very much California.
Wow. Well, and that's another question. Why do people move around quite so far in the US and away from their friends and family, I guess?
Well, interestingly enough, my view is that it's the job that took us. I mean, when I worked for Xerox Corporation, I moved 16 times in 11 years. Wow. Okay. And then when I got to Dallas, I didn't want to move anymore. And I told them that, and they immediately fired me. That's true. And so it's the job that takes us away. But interesting, most of the people that I know that are moving back to be closer to friends. Either they're the seniors moving closer to grandchildren, or the people, yeah, and that's mostly it. But sometimes there's the younger people that are moving to be closer to their parents as they age or become more invalid. Yeah. So it's I never thought it was unusual to move around a lot. I was expected to, but then again, my parents' generation did not move much. They stayed in the same house if they could for as long as they could.
Okay, final question in this series, unless anybody else has got any questions to go in the chat box, is guns. I mean, we are horrified here that young people, crazy people can walk around with AK-47s and walk into schools and shoot people. We just don't get it in Europe. I know you can't explain it, and I know you've got some good arguments for it, Tim. You've got a minute to prepare your case for Texas gun law.
I could never prepare a case for the slaughter of innocents. It's the saddest thing. It's mind-boggling. And there's no excuse for it. The loss of one life, innocent life, child or adult, is the saddest. Now, the case goes back to, it's a very American idea of gun ownership, because if you look at in the 16 and 1700s, the guns were more popular, and more homes had a gun than had a Bible. More homes had a gun than had a chair or a chamber pot. It was just something that was absolutely necessary to find food or to protect yourself from hostile people. So the whole idea of having a gun goes way, way back. And any assault on that, like what happened September 1st, 1774, when your man General Gage, took control of the gunpowder houses. That was a tantamount to seizing guns. Well, that started the big conflagration that is the war. It's just It's just a really big thing. Now, Texas has more guns because of its vast rural spaces where you need them. Okay. But the whole idea about having that many in urban life. The other thing, and I'll run over the minute here, is there should be something called red flag laws, which I support, which is if a person is being deemed a mental case or shouldn't have a gun, that you can take it away. But the gun people are scared of that are afraid of that being abused. It's called capitulation. Well, they'll start with that. Or I could say to, my friend Carl, I heard him, he was saying that, he's so fed up with things and I know he's got a gun. I think he's a real danger. Well, LAPD can come in and swoop up on my word, his guns, which he's the sanest guy you're ever going to find out. I just got a beef with him. Okay. So there's abuse of the red flag laws, but it's tragic. The numbers, however, are very different. There's almost 50,000 gun deaths in the US. 26,000 of them are suicides by gun. 21,000 are homicides by gun. Of the infamous assault rifle, approximately 400 deaths are by assault rifles. Okay, less than 400. 10 times more deaths are caused by clubs or knives. Okay, so the numbers are being skewed. And by the way, all those statistics are from the Center of Disease Control, not known to be pro-gun by any stretch of the imagination. The other thing I will say is that according to the NRA, I'm suspicious of that. I used to be a lifetime member. I'm resigned. According to the NRA, guns have stopped 2 million crimes.
Okay, Tim,
Yeah.
I think you put up a good case for the defense there. Perhaps we'll debate that with our American friends later on. But can I thank you for your time? Can I thank you for being so sporting with some of my questions, which were a bit direct and a bit deep? And can I ask everybody, all the members of Monday Night Live, to give you the usual vote of thanks for your terrific talk?
Well,
and,
thank you. It was a pleasure. I didn't find the questions difficult at all. I mean, I thought you're such a respectful guy. You're an epic human being, Derek Arden.
Well, next time you come on, I'll make them a bit more difficult. In that case, if you want a challenge, we can always have a go at that.
Well, here's the thing that I love is me and my friend Carl are on opposite ends of some of the beliefs, but we're very good friends. And I cherish that. And I think everybody should really try to be that. Find people who disagree with you or whose opinions you don't agree with, but can still respect the individual. I think I treasure that kind of friendship. So anyway.
Tim, I'm going to make the last point. I think it was you that told me how to disagree without being disagreeable. Isn't that the real trick of it all? Yeah. Tim Durkin, thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join us on Monday Night Live again very shortly. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.